everyone. Welcome to Ask ALB, a new podcast that features interviews with prominent lawyers and thought leaders. We will discuss legal trends, create usable takeaways that tackle pressing legal issues, and hear inspiring stories from senior lawyers. My name is Amanda Chia from Asian Legal Business. We are very excited to do this show, and I hope you will enjoy and find it useful. Today, we have Francis Xavier on Ask ALB. Francis Xavier is the Regional Head of Dispute Resolution at Rajah Tann Singapore, and he was appointed Senior Counsel in January 2009. He practices international, commercial, treaty arbitration and litigation. Francis is recognized as a leading disputes lawyer in many rankings, including ALB Asia's Top 15 Litigators 2021. He is a Chartered Arbitrator and is on the arbitrator panels of several leading arbitral institutions. He is the immediate past president of the Inter-Pacific Bar Association and the immediate past global president of Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. Francis is also the general editor of two publications, Civil Litigation in Singapore and Arbitration in Singapore, a practical guide, both published by Sweet Maxwell in 2017 and 2018. He is currently the chairman of the Listings Appeal Committee, Singapore Stock Exchange, and also the chairman of the Inquiry Panel of the Law Society of Singapore. He has been recently reappointed as a member of the Rules Committee, Singapore Academy of Law, for a further 2-year term. Hi, Francis. Thank you for joining us, ALB, today.
Hi, Amanda. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. So today we have Francis Xavier from Rajah Tann. Let's start. Francis, please tell us about yourself, your childhood family, education background. What are some of the defining moments of your childhood?
Well, Amanda, I think the childhood days were not very remarkable, catching spiders, hunting guppies in drains, playing marbles. But I guess if you ask me about defining moments, I think when I was very young, my dad, when I was born, my mom had severe postpartum depression. And my dad somehow ended up consulting a very famous, like an astrologer. And I think that guy basically told my dad that I will not be very bright. In fact, he told him that I will be like a moron. And so my dad figured out, all right, this is my firstborn son, so no choice, we can't give him away. So what he decided, I think, was my father was a very gifted footballer. So he decided he would make me into a sportsman. And the one big childhood memory that I have is ever since I was maybe 5 years old, my dad would force himself to wake up at some unearthly hour, like 5 a.m., when it was still very, very dark, the street lights were all on. He would wake me up and then he will take me to a large field near my house and he would make me run, because that's the way to make me into an athlete. So by the time I became, like 10, 11 years old, every race that I took part, I would win, because, I grew up with running. Running was like, my breath was like nothing. Running was so easy for me because I started doing it when I was 5. And but and then I was running until I think I did my SRP Form 3 in Malaysia. And the minute I actually did reasonably well in the exam, my father got a shock. And he called me in and says, it's up to you whether you want to continue running. And on that day, I gave up running because, it was something that was forced upon me. But I think the lifelong lesson that I learned, and I'm so grateful to my dad, who's since, of course, gone back to the Lord, is that it took a lot out of him to wake up so early and take me to the field every day, right? Unless it rained. And so when it rained, I'll celebrate, right? And it taught me that even if you were doing something you didn't like, good at it. So I think that was the backbone of a sense of confidence that I've always had with me, that if you put your shoulder to the wheel and did your best, there is no way you could fail, So that was the way I learned it, from my father, day after day.
So that's not the kind of story that I had expected when you started with your mother, it was difficult pregnancy and then consult an astrologer. That was not what I expected, right? So it sounds like you're a man of many talents. You're now a very successful lawyer. Yeah, and a career of 34 years. What are some of the achievements that you are very proud of?
Well, Mantha, I think looking back, at the legal career that I've had, I think the first blessing that I've had, which I think, I've been very lucky. I don't think many people will have that blessing to the extent that I have, is that I've worked with some of the brightest, stars in the legal, sky here in Singapore, right? So, I was fortunate to start my lawyering with A&G. So I had a great pupil master, Michael Huang. I had a chance to work with Lucian Wong, the likes of Justice Wu now, Wu Billy, Justice Chu Han Teck, K. Shanmugam. And then when I moved across in 1998 to Allen and Gledhill, I worked with, great mentors such as V.K. Rajah, Stephen Chong, Sundaresh Menon, and of course the many colleagues that I have here. And of course, being in the profession, you make many friends in the legal fraternity. So I think that has been one of the things that I've been truly proud of. It's been great. And in R&T, I think I've had a quite an interesting journey. So we started off as a domestic firm, and over the years we sort of reached out across the seas. And beyond our borders, and today we have 12 offices in 10 countries. That journey has been very, very satisfying to form a, huge set of colleagues, comrades, and friends across ASEAN and beyond in the region. And one other journey that has been very exciting has been Singapore's growth into being the global arbitration powerhouse. I remember when, my pupil master, Michael Huang, used to be very active in arbitration, and I followed in his footsteps. And as Singapore grew, as a leading light in arbitration, that journey and then, culminated in me being involved in Chartered Institute of Arbitrators through, the persuasion of Rajah Tann, my mentor in CIR, and then ultimately becoming CIR Global President, last year. So that's been an equally satisfying journey. So I would think at many levels, I've been very, very fortunate that this legal journey has been truly, fulfilling, at many levels.
Is there anything that you haven't tried, haven't done with your legal career? If I were to ask, what's the next step? Because you've had so many posts, you've worked with so many associations. What would be the next one, you think?
Well, Mantha, I guess after 34 years, you've ticked all the boxes. So yeah. I unfortunately, I haven't got a box that I haven't ticked yet. So maybe that's why I feel so fulfilled.
Maybe something more global, maybe something more international. So, this segment of the program is called Up Close, right? And I really want to see this other side of Francis Xavier, and as I'm sure many of our audiences do. A couple of us worked with you at the IPBA 2019 Singapore. Until now, it remains the biggest IPBA by the number of attendees. And you have all these other roles, which you've just said, right? One of the things that our audience always wants to know is how do senior lawyers like yourself create time for all these extra things? Because the one thing that stands the same is always everyone has 24 hours, no matter who you are. Can you comment on that?
Well, Mantha, it's interesting that you raise it. It's been a lifelong quest with me, right? Because when I started practice, and I think coming from Malaysia and then into the, well, people call it the pressure cooker of Singapore, I think one of the things that struck me was, there was constant pressure to give up everything that your heart yearned for and to just hunker down and just focus on lawyering, almost to the exclusion of everything else, And so when I started practice, there were a lot of, what I would call limiting beliefs, which were thrust upon me, which at one level, I resisted and resented deeply, because my sense was always that if being a good lawyer meant that I couldn't be a good son to my father, I couldn't be a good buddy to my friends, I couldn't be a good person who looked after the community at some point. If I couldn't, and I couldn't be a good ally to myself. I couldn't fill my heart with the things that I love to do, to see, to experience. Then what is the point in being a good lawyer? And I constantly questioned it, right? But I think in the first number of years in my career, I couldn't see life in any other way. So I sort of half believed this, someday conversations that, were fed into you. Someday, in the future, maybe in 20, 30 years time, when you've become a good lawyer, maybe you'll have time to, really enjoy life. But what happened, fortunately for me, and, because I'm constantly railing against this, quite by accident, I think into my ninth or 10th year of practice, I decided, that I'm tired of having a someday conversation. I got to a point where I think I was burning the candle at both ends. And I said, you know what? No more someday conversations. I wanted to see the summit of Mount Everest like now. So I somehow forced myself to make the time. And this was like within the next 2 weeks, I forced myself to make time. And I squeezed out 11 days and I went to Everest, the Everest region, It was a very difficult journey because, flights were sold out and everyone said this is off season. There were rebels killing people up in the mountains. But I refused to yield, I refused to say it's not possible. I fought it all the way and I made it happen. And I think when I came back, I had an epiphany, which is that if you fight for something hard enough, you can make it happen. And it doesn't matter what your logical mind thinks the odds are. And I learned a very important lesson, which is, and when I came back, I was so full of life. I'd seen the summit of Everest. I'd been to the Himalayas. I'd seen all these, 8,000 meter, almost 9-kilometer high peaks. And all of a sudden, my heart was full. And then when I went back to the office, it was joyful to get to the office. And so from that moment on, I made sure that I followed my passion. And, and initially I thought it'd probably have a damaging effect on my practice because now I'm distracted. But you know what? I discovered, Amantha, that has made me the lawyer that I am today. Because I can't see how I could have been as creative as I became, as passionate as I became, as energized as I became as a lawyer, if not for the fact that my heart is full. If you're running on empty, of what good are you to anyone, right? You're constantly bitching about the fact that, you would love to do the silk route, but, you're never going to see it for the next 20 years. I don't know. It's not a very empowering conversation. So when I came back, I then discovered that, when I followed my passions, I was fully alive. It's like when you're in an exam and you need to prepare, or you have a deadline for an essay. The last 2 days, you don't understand how you access nuclear capability and you get it done. But that nuclear capability, you accessed it because of a threat. Somebody had a big stick and says to you, if you don't do it now, you're going to get kicked out of law school. And then you access that nuclear capability. I learned that you can access the nuclear capability through passion. So if I have a percussion session at 6:45 with one of the world's top drummers who happens to be in Singapore, and I negotiate a 45-minute segment with him one-on-one, and in the course of that day, I had to get out 2 opinions. You know what? I will get it done because there is no way on earth I'm going to miss the session, the percussion session with the world's greatest Latin percussionist, for instance. And I found that you could access nuclear capability by scheduling things that you loved. Imagine if you're a young person and you had a hot date at 7:00 on a particular day, and on that day you had to get A, B, C done. Do you think you're not going to get A, B, and C done in great time, in super spirits? That's what you're going to do. You're going to pull up everything you can in yourself and get it done. And so that's nuclear capability access, And so I found when I filled my life with the things that I love to do, that my heart yearned for, I became a better lawyer. Because I could access the nuclear capability, and I became fully alive. Nothing beats being alive, Amanda.
What's your nuclear power? I mean, what drives you, Francis?
It's the joy. It's the song in your heart. I mean, when your heart is full, you're not bitching, right? So you know how it's so. All right. For instance, I'm leaving on Saturday, on a trip. Of course, it's a work trip, but I'm looking forward to it. But because there is something, or let's say, what you do, you're a busy trial lawyer. You're super busy. But you know what? You have taken the trouble to ask yourself, what is the one thing you could do this year that would make you so happy? And your answer was, I want to spend 2 weeks with the exotic animals in Galapagos, right? So you wanted to get to Ecuador and fly to Galapagos. And you researched it in your free time, whatever time you had, and you have booked a flight. And it's July now, but you've booked a flight on, say, the 7th of November. You know how you get excited, how you get depressed, on a Sunday night, and how you get excited on a Friday, right? So now, even though your trip, you're only going to physically fly out in November, you're excited. You can already see, the exotic animals in front of you. You can see Ecuador. The Ecuador is on the horizon, and all of a sudden you're energized. And you've got to get it all done properly in style before you take the plane. And so every day it's not business as usual. You're wide awake. You want to go in. What is it that I have to tackle? What are the dragons that I have to slay? What are the tasks that I have to complete properly so that I can have a great holiday? All of a sudden you're alive. All of a sudden you're accessing nuclear capability. So I realized that, as opposed to you don't have that trip because you're saying, oh my God, I've got 5 trials this year. So Galapagos is not possible for the next 10 years, perhaps, maybe after 10 years. And you're in this state of, you're bitching to yourself, right? Life is tough, my career is oppressing me. How creative are you? How alive are you? How dynamic are you?
I can see as you're describing this, it's like you're busting out, you're really finding it hard to contain your passion for this. I think it's really that reason, right? That drives you to that gives you meaning to whatever you do. You also sound like you lead a super organized life, right? I just have to say, you still sleep, right? As you manage all these things.
I get too much of sleep every day.
Okay. What are some of your guiding principles? How do you stay super organized?
Well, so this is what happened, right? So when I found out that the secret to life is to follow your heart, right? To really living is to follow your heart. Then so many things prop up, right? I want to buy this drum set and I want to form a band. I want to stand by the side of an erupting volcano as it erupts. I want to be 120 meters below the surface of the sea to be 8 meters away from a bull shark, without a cage. I want to get certified on the Formula One, So all these things start bursting into your life because that's what makes you excited, right? And so now not only do you have to do 5 trials a year or 10 trials a year, but you also want to dive with the bull sharks, get certified on the race cars. You want to climb, an erupting volcano in Indonesia. Then a huge challenge looms in front of you, right? Because it's easy to run life, by cutting out everything you love and just focusing on what you think has to be done, right? Not doing the things you love and just going to work and just plowing at it because that's what you're meant to do. That's your duty. You need to, save money and so on. But when you say, look, I'm going to get all of those 5 trials done, but at the same time, I'm going to have fun with the bull sharks. And at the same time, I'm going to spend quality time with my parents who are abroad. At the same time, I'm going to take my parents to see the Taj Mahal and so on. Life then becomes very challenging, right? It's not so simple anymore. So you start walking at the edge of the sharp tip of the knife, right? You need to be fully awake. You need to pay attention. And so I went on a journey because I was not willing to compromise and go back to default mode and be, an animated vegetable, right?
Life worth living.
Yes. And so I had to master various things. I think the first thing that I had to master was, how do I stay in the zone, right? At any time of the day. So it doesn't work for me if I'm very, very fresh in the morning, but in the afternoon, my concentration goes off, brain fog sets in. Because the more effective you are, the less time you need to spend physically in the office. Right? When you're very, very fresh, you can speed through your work. You can do better work faster, right?
Yeah.
In less time, you do better work, right? And so how do you stay in the zone? So I had to master diet to keep away the brain fog, right? No after lunch drowsiness. So diet, vitality, right? You are as strong as your body is strong. Your mind is as strong as your body. What cardio principles do you have to infuse into your life? How do you get quality sleep? So I measure my sleep on an app called Sleep Cycle. I also wear the Aura ring. So I had to learn all of this, right? So it's not unidimensional. So that's at a macro level. I had to go into a journey and ask myself, how do I stay at my peak, mental and physical, right? How can I stay in my best shape? It reminded me of the days when, I used to have a 30-kilometer run. I'm taking part in a 30-kilometer race, and I needed to be in peak condition for the race. So being a good lawyer is the same thing. The better athlete you are, the better lawyer you are, right? So that's at a macro level. And then beyond that, at a micro level, I think there were tools that I discovered, right? By looking for them, by, seek and you shall find. So one of the tools were Kaizen, right? Kaizen says one bite of the apple at a time. You take one bite of the apple one day at a time, and soon you will consume the apple. So I wanted to learn the drums. The Kaizen principle says I need to spend 15 minutes a day, just even as little as 15 minutes a day, practicing on my rudiments, and I'll become a drummer. And that's what happened. That's how I became a drummer. Because can you imagine being a trial lawyer and trying to become a drummer? Most people think it's impossible. And I think if you look at it from the traditional, concept of having lessons and, spending hours and hours, it's not possible. But using Kaizen, small blocks of time done on a daily basis, you make it. It's amazing. So one other tool that I used with devastating effectiveness in my life was the Pareto principle, right? And believe you me, the Pareto principle really works. If I were to tell you that a small proportion of your effort produces a disproportionate amount of your result, then all you need to do is to identify for yourself what is the small amount of effort that creates this bonanza, and then multiply that. And many people know it as theory, but I kind of went into it and realized at a very microscopic level what in my day-to-day moments were creating my results, right? And it took me a while to analyze it, but once I got clarity, I became way more powerful than I was before. Now I could handle twice the workload and spend less time, doing what needs to be done on that level of workload, And then at another level, at a micro level, you have to question your relationship with everything you do, right? Are you handling emails in an optimal fashion? If you're the sort, you show up in the office first thing in the morning, open your laptop, and you start clearing emails, that's not optimal, right? So the way I found works for me, for instance, is that I schedule time during the day when I will, clear my email. So I'll start the day with the biggest dragon I have to slay, right?
Mm-hmm.
I get into the office, and this is many people teach that, right? I just started applying it, right? And then as you battle the dragon and you've hacked off 5 of his tentacles and you're a little tired, you need a break, you take a walk around the office. And then when you get back to your desk, you start clearing emails for 20 minutes, right? And then when you've done that, switch back to slaying the dragon, So what you need to journey into what really works for you. So, it's a little bit like putting the big rocks in, interspersed by the small rocks, and then you can pour in a lot of water, You need to figure out ask yourself every day, how can you do this better, faster?
Right. Yes. This is part and parcel of knowing yourself first, right? Having the tools, analyzing what works, and then coming up with a routine that's very, very you, in order to get this work. You mentioned here and there, right, about the forest, about, animals. It sounds like these are some of the things that you do outside of work. And of course, your band, I can't tell you, I think 3 people came up and said, we really want to hear about Francis and his band and think your week and all of that. Can you tell us a little bit more? What other, what are you pursuing, right, outside of work now? And can you tell us more about your beliefs, your courses, these courses?
Well, Amanda, you see, once I allowed myself to give my heart free rein, I was amazed at how much of a rainbow the Creator made us.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to think that you were meant to be a lawyer, right? Because you ended up becoming a lawyer and you start focusing on the color red. But you're not any one color. You are composite white, light, broken down into the all the colors of the rainbow and all the shades of the rainbow. So being a great lawyer may be a bright red, but that's not even the full spectrum of red, let alone the other colors that are next to it. So I discovered there were many things that my heart yearned for, right? So to answer your question, what the biggest thing that is closest to my heart outside of work is, I do a lot of work in Malaysia. So it's tiger conservation of the remaining forests, the central spine. So I do a huge amount of work. I can't say that we've seen much results. We've seen some.
You do a lot of work. Do you actually be there and do the work?
Yes, except for COVID. So I work through a team that's operating. So I'm in touch with all the various. Take tigers, for instance. So I'm in touch with Rimba, Pantera, WWF. So we have ongoing conversations, and I've been doing this for the last, maybe 8-9 years. And so we are constantly, I get updates on a bi-weekly basis as to what the rangers are doing in Kelantan, in Terengganu. Some of them will see a baby tiger. And because of the pandemic, the poachers are gone. And we are seeing tiger cub footprints. I get pictures of them. It brightens up my day. So I spend a lot of time on tiger conservation. I spend a lot of time with organizations like Yayasan Hasana in Malaysia on central spine conservation, river conservation, lake conservation. That's a big part of what I do. The next thing that's very close to my heart is, reaching out to disadvantaged groups. And unfortunately, in Singapore, you have got 3 over 1,000. Fortunately, in Singapore, you have 3 over 1,000 VWOs, voluntary welfare organizations, taking care of a lot of people. So I do some work here through Rotary, through various other organizations. But the biggest thing that I do is I formed an NGO years ago in Malaysia called Bumi Alam. And through that NGO, we work with Anwar Ibrahim, the Pakatan Harapan Coalition, and we do a lot of work, outreach to youth. We've opened up quite a number of preschools, single mom enrichment centers, youth enrichment, computer classes. So we raise money, buy computers, pay for the teachers. We teach single mothers, sewing, how to use a sewing machine and to become certified seamstresses. So that's what we do. And in the last year and a half, a lot of what we've been doing has been very basic. So we've supplied food for something like tens of thousands of families, because the food has been, most of them are just starving, right? Just last week, I think we sent food up for 1,000 families. So that's the next thing that's very close to my heart. And other than that, being involved in the legal field outside of practice in CIR, in IPBA, and organizations such as SAL. I'm the chair of the Junior College Program. I've been the chair for more than a decade. Other SAL committees such as promotion of Singapore law, outreach of the influence of thought leadership of Singapore in arbitration, in the arbitration world, all across the world. I've been involved in that for a long time. And beyond that, of course, I've got many personal interests, as you can gauge, from diving to many other crazy things. People always say that I'm an adrenaline junkie. Maybe I am. Maybe I don't have a wife to stop me from doing any of these things. I run amok from the forest to everywhere else.
No, you said this just now that these are very basic things, but I think especially in the pandemic, it's all these basic differences that someone can make, right? That's truly important. I can't imagine, it's difficult enough coping with the pandemic, but you talk about just having a basic meal. I think that's such an important and a big impact it makes to these people, right? And we absolutely should not discount the impact. I like to ask this question, right? And I'm guessing that I know your answer, which is one big world problem that world leaders should address. Because when we look at the world now, especially in the last 18 months, there's so many things happening. Pandemic is just one. It's not just a pandemic. From your position, what is that problem, right? And why?
Well, Amantha, you're quite right. You already heard part of it. I would say the single biggest challenge that the world needs to confront and tackle properly is, our environment. Not only the physical environment, forests, wilderness areas, but also, the wildlife, right? I think we've come to a stage where we are indiscriminately destroying forests, wild spaces. And this is extremely short-sighted. So it's something that, and we do a lot of work in Malaysia, right? Because, you can't, there was a time, I was trying to spread myself and focus on East Malaysia and West Malaysia. I realized, it was too big a call, So I just focus on the peninsula, right? I've got other teams focusing on Sabah and Sarawak. And I can tell you this, we've put in years and years of work, coordination of speaking to government departments, wildlife departments, to anti-poaching units. And if you ask me how successful have we been, I'll be very frank. I don't think we've had even a fraction of the traction that we would have liked to have seen. But you know what? We don't care, because I think we can't give up on this work. We have made progress. Sometimes it's very tiny, right? It's very tiny in the sense that we succeed in getting a small area gazetted. We succeed in making sure that in one particular area, a road where the poachers constantly are utilizing is then being monitored by the army. It solves that problem, but then you have 150 other problems, all across all the neighboring areas. So sometimes you feel overwhelmed and you feel like, giving up, because, it takes a lot of time, right? You're not paid for it. It's a labor of love, but you keep going on because, if you gave up, then there is no hope, right? Then the forest will be overrun. But you're not alone. There are many people. So we hold hands with the many organizations, many other individuals who are committed to the cause. And we move, even if it's 1 inch at a time. And sometimes we move up 1 inch and then, we discover that a huge area has been logged, illegally, even though it was supposed to be a forest sanctuary. And so there are a lot of setbacks, but I think it's important. You don't give up. You don't give up on the wildlife. You don't give up on the forest. You don't give up on what matters.
What's the next step? Are you still going to focus on the peninsula?
I am. No. I will focus on the peninsula until the day I die. The forests are amazing. I spent a lot of time in the forest. So just before the pandemic, I spent 3 weeks with a tribe called the Temia. They're the forgotten tribes of Temia. They cook for me in bamboo the way they've cooked for thousands of years. And they showed me how they hunt in the rivers. They showed me herds of wild elephants, how not to be trampled by they taught me elephant body language. Now, this is simply amazing, right? So one of the things I'm doing is like trying to create an eco zone, a special park where visitors can have the kind of experience that I've had, Most people in Malaysia haven't even heard of the Temia. They've heard of the Iban, Senoi, but they haven't heard of the Temia. They still live like they've lived for thousands of years, right? Hundreds of thousands of years. And so we have many plans. We want to set up tiger sanctuaries. We want to set up tiger parks where, it's like going to Africa, right? I've been to so many big parks in Africa. You can see the wildlife because it's basically grassland. Malaysia is a rainforest, but we want to create the experience where you can go into the rainforest and see a wild tiger, not a tiger in a zoo, but a wild tiger in controlled situation, right? So I'm very excited, but it's obviously a long-term program. So we're working on initiatives like that: tiger forest conservation, eco research into forests. How do we tap onto the indigenous community to be trackers, anti-poacher squads, educating them on the importance of the forest? How do we work, to create tourist attractions in Malaysia that are, alive and viable? There's a lot of work to be done.
Sounds like a very fulfilling life. You mentioned the animals, you mentioned the rainforest, your work takes you everywhere. I mean, even in Singapore, I'm sure you have a very busy routine, right? Are there any regrets in life? I don't want to sound like, this is not a negative question, but just, is there anything else that you haven't done? Is there anything you want to do? And you said you're an adrenaline junkie, all right? What keeps you from trying, and what's your next thing?
Well, Mantha, once I had that epiphany in the Everest region, when I came back, every year, every quarter, every half year, I would take out an empty sheet of paper and I would ask myself the question: if I was dead at the end of the quarter, if I was dead at the end of the mid-year, if I was dead at the end of the year, what is the one thing I wanted to do, see, or experience? Or who is the one or two persons or families that I needed to reconnect with if I was going to breathe my last? And so fortunately, for the last many years, I have been creating what subsequently, so the movie The Bucket List came out years after I created my bucket list. I didn't realize they call it a bucket list. So fortunately today, I can tell you that if the Lord calls me up now, I stop breathing, because we do breathe only upon the grace of the Lord. If I stop breathing now, I would have hardly any regrets. I have a bucket list now. So diving in Raja Ampat is one of them. Climbing these two volcanoes. One is a cone volcano in Congo, and then climbing this shield volcano in Ethiopia. And I have other things, right? I want to dive with the great white sharks at the tip of South Africa. I missed it the last time because the weather conditions were bad. But you know what? I will do it, I'm sure, when the pandemic is quelled. But I've had so many. I'm ticking off 6 to 8 things. I've been doing that for the last 2 decades, right? So the one thing that I will not have much of is regrets, I'm afraid, Amantha.
Thank you so much for sharing your multidimensional life, Francis. It's very, very interesting to hear. I'm really glad to be able to see this side of you, right? I'm sure that you work with so many of your colleagues, your customers, your friends, and it's just really, really interesting, very insightful. Thank you so much for being here with us at Ask ALB.
Thank you, Amantha. It's been a pleasure. It was fun. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. It has been Francis Xavier on Ask ALB. With that, we would like to thank everyone for joining us today. Remember, Ask ALB can be streamed on iTunes, Spotify, or Google Podcasts, and we'll catch you in the next episode.